All right, we're going to take a look at another example. If you're feeling really confident, go ahead and pause this and try it on your own, and then check your work to see if it matches up with what I have. Okay, for those of you who want some more practice, that's fine. Just keep following along, write this down. Write it down as I'm writing it down as well. Okay, so we have another example. Here are the three equations. I'm going to use the graphic organizer again for this one because I think it makes a little bit more sense. We want to try and get these three equations down to two equations. So I'm looking to eliminate or get rid of one of my variables. We are looking to get rid of whatever variable where the numbers in front of it are either 1 or they're multiples of each other. So I have two different variables that I could actually use for this one. I could either get rid of the x's because my first and second equation have a 1 in front of it, or I could get rid of z because the first and third equation have a 1 in front of it. I'm going to get rid of x. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and label these equations. I'm going to label them a little bit different just so that I'm not confused as I work through it. I'm going to label it A, B, and C. Okay, if you want to label it 1, 2, and 3, that's fine as well. The only thing, like we saw in the last example, was that sometimes if you're showing what you're doing for elimination, and let's say you're multiplying it by 2, sometimes it can get confusing as which number is the one being multiplied and which number represents the equation. So I'm just going to keep it A, B, and C so it's easier to tell as I go to make these into two equations. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the opposite of A. So that means I'm going to multiply equation A by -1. And I'm going to add that to the original for B. I'm doing that because I want to get rid of my x values here. So right now, both of them are positive. So one of them has to be negative in order to get rid of them and cancel out. So opposite of A means everything gets multiplied by -1. I have a negative x, negative y, positive z, and a -6. I'm going to add that to the original for B, x plus 3y minus 2z equals 14. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to cancel out terms, simplify those together. So I have the x's that'll cancel out. I have a positive 2y, a negative z, and then a positive 8. Okay, so that's one of my equations. Now the next equation needs to have only y and z in it as well. So I need to somehow combine that third equation. I'm just going to combine b and c together. Okay, but in order to combine them together, I need to multiply by -3 to b in order to get that x to cancel out. So -3 times b, and I'm going to add that to the original of c. So for -3b, I have a -3x, a -9y, a positive 6z, and a -42. I'm going to add that to C, the original, 3x minus 2y plus z equals -5. Okay, so my x's cancel out. I now have a -11y, a positive 7z, and a -47. That's your second equation. All right, so that's step 2. We're done with that one right now. So now I need to, for step number 3, I need to combine these two in order to solve for one variable. So let's just write them again. 2y minus z equals 8, -11y plus 7z equals a -47. Okay, so just like when we're solving two equations, we want to look for whichever variable has a 1 in front of it. So in this case, we're looking at z. That's the one that we're going to try to cancel out. If we didn't have a 1 in front of it, then we're looking for easy multiples in order to multiply something by it. So my first equation, in order to get that z to cancel out, I need to multiply that entire equation by a 7. So when I do that, my new equation will be 14y minus 7z equals 56. So now I can add that to my second equation. I'm just rewriting it here. I'm going to add that to a negative 11y, positive 7z, and a negative 47. So go ahead and add those together. This will give you 3y. These cancel out, and this gives you a positive 9. Now you need to solve for the variable, so divide everything by 3. So y equals 3 in this case. Now for step number 4, we're replacing the variable that we just found in step 3 into one of our equations in the box 2. So it doesn't matter which equation, I'm going to just choose the first one. 2y minus z equals 8. Now I'm going to plug 3 in for y. So I have 6 minus z equals 8. Subtract 6. Okay, negative z equals 2. So I'm going to divide them both by negative 1. That means z has to equal negative 2. All right, step number 5, we're going to substitute the two values that we just found, y and z, into one of your equations from box 1. I'm going to choose equation A, or your first equation. I'm going to plug in our values, x. We have a 3 for y. Now pay careful attention to this negative sign. We are subtracting the value for z. So I'm subtracting a negative 2. Okay, so you should have two subtraction signs there. This will actually turn into adding 2 when I go to simplify. So I have x plus 5 equals 6. Subtract 5. So that gives me an x equals 1. So my ordered triplet is 1, 3, negative 2. Okay, so that one was just another review one that we've had. I'm going to do one more example with you guys, and then you guys can go ahead and look at the worksheet that you had from Monday to practice some of the other ones. This next example is actually going to be an example from a problem on your worksheet. Okay, so we did those two with the graphic organizer. This one I'm not going to do with the graphic organizer just because for space reasons with that, it's going to take a little bit more time to kind of work through this one. But we want to get rid of one of your variables for this one. And if you notice, it's not easy to kind of tell which variable we're going to get rid of. Okay, so like I said in some of the previous examples, you're looking for a variable that has 1 in front of it, and then variables that have multiples. Okay, so I have two variables that have a 1 in front of it, this y and z. So I want to look at the other numbers that go in front of those in the other equations. Let's just label this a, b, and c. Okay, so for a and c, I have 5 and 7. Okay, those are multiples. Okay, so we could multiply those together. We could just each, or not multiples, sorry, but I can multiply that together to get 35. Wouldn't be too bad. But let's look at z here. I have 2 and 4. Those are going to be, first of all, they're smaller numbers, so they're going to be a little bit easier to work with. And all I would need to multiply would be equation A and equation C. I would only need to multiply those two equations in order to get all the numbers to match up. Where if I look at y, I would have to multiply all 3 equations, okay, because 5 doesn't go into 7 and 7 doesn't go into 5. But for the 2 that goes here with the z, the 2 goes into 4. So that's probably going to be the easier one. So now I'm going to work through that graphic organizer. If you want that again, go ahead. I'm just going to do it here. Step number 2 was to combine these 3 equations into 2. So I've already determined that I'm trying to get rid of the z values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually do, we're going to take 2 times a and I'm going to add that to equation B. Okay, because if I multiply, just looking at the z for right now, if I multiply that by 2, that's a -4, and that would cancel out with my +4 from example B. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So that gives me 6x plus 10y minus 4z equals a -2. I'm adding that to 2x minus y plus 4z equals 37. All right, so go ahead and add those together. 8x, positive 9y. My z's will cancel out. And that gives me 35. Okay, there's one equation. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a by itself. Do a couple different ways for right here. Okay, but I do need to include equation C somehow. So I'm going to take equation A and I'm going to multiply that to a -2c. Okay, just looking at the z value, if I were to multiply -1z by -2, that gives me +2z, and that will cancel out with the value in front of z for equation A. I know that this step might be a little bit confusing, so maybe pause this video, go back and kind of rehear what I'm saying. You want to try to get the z values to cancel out. So if I multiply just this z value by -2, that gives me +2z. And so when I add that together with this z value up top in equation A, they will cancel. And that's what I'm looking for. So A is staying by itself, 3x plus 5y minus 2z equals -1. Then I'm taking -2 and multiplying it to c. So -16x, -14y, +2z, and then a -84. So add those together. But -13x, a -9y, your z's cancel out, and then you're left with a -85. All right, so we have a little bit larger numbers here than some of the ones that we've worked with before, but that's all right. So this here was step 1. This was step 2. So step 3, I'm actually going to combine the two equations, and I want to solve for a variable. So it's going back to the original values. I'm just going to write them again. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, the nice thing about this equation is I don't have to do anything with multiplying, because if I notice with my y, the numbers in front are opposite of each other, so I can just go ahead and add these together, and that'll cancel out. So I have a -5x my y's cancel out. And then when I add 35 and -85, I'm left with a -50. So I'm going to solve for x. So x gives me 10. All right, so step number 4 now. And I'm going to write these steps kind of in the order of the graphic organizer. Step 4, I'm plugging my value for x back into one of the equations from 2. Doesn't really matter. I'm just going to take the first one. Let me rewrite that. 35. Okay, so I have 8 times 10 plus 9y equals 35. So I have 80 plus 9y equals 35. I'm going to subtract 80 from 35. So I have 9y equals a -45. Solve for y. Y will give